Hello, and welcome to the People's AI, presented by Vana. Today, we have an episode I am super fired up about. A deep dive conversation about decentralized AI with a widely respected rockstar AI academic who does not come from the Web3 community. That would be Ramesh Raskar, Associate Professor at MIT Media Lab. And I'm proud to partner with Vana to bring you this podcast. Vana's vision is user-owned AI through user-owned data. Vana's mission is to be the world's first open protocol for data sovereignty. And just this past week, Vana unveiled the VRC20 data token standard for fair and transparent data token transactions. You'll find a link to that in the show notes. So, real talk. One of the things I've often wondered about when it comes to decentralized AI or even Web3 powered AI is if it's such a great solution, frankly, why aren't there more people in the quote unquote normal AI world talking about this? Why do you mostly hear about it at crypto conferences? Well, it turns out that they exist. Their voices are not always the loudest, but there are mainstream, respected, credible AI researchers who believe in the merits of decentralized AI and even the intersection of AI and blockchain solutions. One of these academics is Ramesh Raskar, the Associate Director of the MIT Media's Lab, where he explores many aspects of AI, from cameras and photography to the merits of decentralization and yes, even blockchain. He has been at Google. He has been at Facebook. He writes books. He gives keynote speeches. He writes papers. His AI credentials are bulletproof. And as he explains in our conversation, he has been a believer in decentralized AI for many years, well before it became fashionable. And he's now an advisor to Vana, as he believes so strongly in how Vana is tackling these very real problems. So, in our conversation, Ramesh does two things that I found quite interesting. First, he gives a very lucid framework on what he sees as the main pillars of decentralized AI and a bit of a roadmap to success. And he also does something that we rarely see in this space. Normally, decentralized AI and centralized AI or big tech AI are kind of framed as being in competition or even in conflict. I am guilty of this. I totally do this. I've even made YouTube thumbnails that kind of cheekily show centralized AI versus decentralized AI. But Ramesh does something different. He shows decentralized AI not as a rival to centralized AI, but rather as a natural evolution. He cast centralized AI not as the big scary villain, but as the inevitable place where this tech had to begin, and now it's time to evolve. Now, I don't pretend to be an expert on all of the technical details, but just from a branding and communication front, that feels like a super useful and even inclusive way to talk about decentralized AI. And I would encourage others in the space to consider taking notes. So with that, please enjoy my conversation with Ramesh Raskar, Associate Professor at MIT Media's Lab. Ramesh, welcome to the People's AI.
Thank you, Jeff.
So you are such an interesting and well-rounded researcher and scientist in the AI and really innovation world. Before we jump into decentralized AI, talk a bit about your main areas of focus in research at the MIT Media Lab.
Yeah, I work on two main research topics. One is machine learning, the other one is imaging. Those are my hammers, and my nails are health, robotics, perception, democratic ventures, and so on. But really, I'm thinking about where machine learning and imaging will go over the next 10 or 20 years.
One reason I'm excited to talk to you, one of many, is that your background, you have such an academic and credentialed background, and you have also, like many in kind of the Web3 space, you have come to see decentralized AI as a logical path forward for AI. When did that first enter your radar? When did you first start thinking about decentralized AI as a solution?
That's a great question. So, I mean, we have been working on many aspects of machine learning for the last 10, 15 years. And I was actually we also run a few nonprofits. So I was actually at an event in India and working on different types of solutions for the underserved and so on. And I had my team from MIT, and we're just sitting there and we said, we're working on all these issues, but there are certain things that are going to be very challenging. First of all, I can't imagine the talent emerging right here in the middle of this masses we're trying to help. Second is they're not going to realize what are their own rights, their own digital rights, if you start deploying machine learning solutions. And the third is that how are all these individuals who are not part of the kind of the AI revolution, and they're not kind of the first class citizens in terms of the shaping of this revolution, how are they going to economically benefit from this? And right there, actually, we came up with 3 or 4 amazing research ideas. And that's what we have been working on for the last 10 years.
10 years, so well before it was cool, well before it became a trendy topic. So I love that. Let's start with the problem we're trying to solve, and like the problem of centralized AI or traditional AI. How do you articulate what to you is like the biggest problem with the way that AI is traditionally being developed in a kind of centralized fashion?
Yeah, I think it's important to start in a centralized way. That's how you get initial flywheel going. So I like to compare this with it kind of the mainframe era of AI versus the PC era of AI. For those of us old enough, remember that back then, computing and internet was about mainframes, IBM mainframes, Cray supercomputers, and so on. And Bill and Steve had a different idea at Microsoft and Apple, and they said, oh, let's put the computing at the edge. And that completely changed the way we think about the internet. And at some point, that was in the 80s. And in the 90s, we switched over from the internet to the web, which is a massive shift, by the way. Those are the two very different things. And I think it's the same thing with AI. We're starting with the mainframe mindset of AI, where we have this thing called a dumb browser. And through that, we connect to highly centralized AI training and services. And we receive those services through a dumb browser interface. And then we're going to switch over to edge AI, edge compute, where a lot of the things will actually run on our own machines, which will come with a lot of benefits, but with a lot of challenges. For example, when we moved from mainframe to PCs, we didn't have to worry about installing antivirus software. But in the 90s, we had to deal with this crap called Norton antivirus and so on. So I think the same thing is going to happen with AI when we move away from just accessing AI through a browser, through accessing AI through in our daily life, surrounding us. We are in charge of how we drive our own AI. So that's the shift for me from centralization to decentralization. So there's a reason for it why it's happening, but the benefit of that is that now we're going to get innovation at the edges. There'll be more responsible AI because there'll be more checks and balances as more entities are participating. And the original point I made, which is many entities, many individuals will actually get to participate in how AI is being shaped because they can have innovation in their own world.
I love the way you frame that on a couple levels. The mainframe versus PC analogy is brilliant. I haven't really heard that before. I'm stealing that and crediting you. That's fantastic. And then secondly, in a more substantively, I think that people often, myself included, frame this as a decentralized AI versus centralized AI, or like it's pitting one versus the other, and intending to like tearing down centralized AI or big tech AI, and not quite demonizing it, but kind of just saying this is the big scary problem. We need to fix this. And whereas you're framing it in a little more of a kind of positive and even inclusive way of saying, actually, let's not kid ourselves. We have to start with a centralized AI. That's how we make the first several chapters of progress. But then there's a natural evolution toward innovation, as you put it, at the edges. And so decentralization is not kind of a boxing match for centralized, but rather this evolution. That's a great way to frame it.
Yeah. I mean, there are 3 more phases after that. But I think, to your point, the mainframe companies that were right here in Boston on Route 128, because Boston thought we were going to win the computing race, but they didn't adapt fast enough to the edge compute, the decentralization of compute back then. And that's why kind of Boston lost the race and a lot of the energy shifted to the West Coast. But hopefully this time in Boston, we'll be smart enough to realize that the shift is happening, the sand is shifting. And so there's the mainframe era of AI, there's the PC era of AI, which is where we're roughly at. But there are three more phases, Jeff. One is
Okay.
the next phase is the intranet phase, which is agents talking to each other, but the agents are in a walled garden. They all know each other, they all know their presence, they're in a trusted topology, and so on. So that's the current phase, the intranet of AI. But from that, we're going to move to the internet of AI agents, where the agents are talking to entities they haven't seen before. Just like internet is a scary place, the agents are going to start navigating in this scary space where you can't know a priori what the identity there is. There's a your agent KYA aspect of it, the security aspect of it, and so on. So this is going to be the internet equivalent of agentic AI. And then the fifth phase, next phase, sorry, I call it. So the internet of AI is the decentralized AI world. And then the fifth phase is the web, switching from internet to the web, because internet was things like Gopher and FTP and file transfer and talking to each other over a modem, 26 kbps modems and so on.
I remember. Yep.
And from that, we switched over to the web, right here at MIT with World Wide Web Consortium, Tim Berners-Lee. And the switch from intranet to internet, sorry, from internet to the web was four main things. It was HTTP, which is the servers, then HTML, how you experience the web. Then there was URL, which is there's addresses of how do you find other web pages, other websites. And the fourth one is there is a browser. We actually understand how to interact with it. And so we think we're going to move from the internet of AI agents to the web of AI agents. And we're going to really have an experience that's completely difficult to imagine. And so a lot of my research at MIT is thinking about the web of agents, not intranet of agents or the internet of agents.
I definitely want to dive into what that vision looks like in a bit. Before we do, I appreciate how you frame this not as a battle of centralized AI versus decentralized AI, but an evolution. But let's linger for a moment on what are the let's call it limitations of centralized AI. Why in your mind does it need to, or should it evolve in this path toward what's it, if it stays centralized, stays with kind of a few big players? What do you see as the shortcomings of that?
Yeah, I think there are some inputs and there are some outputs. So the inputs to this revolution is, again, AI moving to the edge devices. The second is this notion that we'll have millions, maybe billions, maybe trillions of agents that are self-contained, and they might access other tools, memory, internet, and so on. But a lot of these modules will run on edge devices. They'll be very, very small. The agents will be very powerful. So there's some input reasons why this revolution will take place in decentralized AI. But there are also some outputs or goals. So one major goal is, even in centralized companies, I have run AI teams at Google, at Facebook, Apple. I have run AI teams at these big companies myself during a leave from MIT. And I think centralization is critical in these companies because to really get the early innovation going, you can't be dealing with things where things are spread out, right? You have to get the talent and data and compute in one place to start making progress. But then what ends up happening is reluctantly, very reluctantly, the same centralized players also become in charge of the innovation and also the responsibility for it. So I don't think people at Google are excited about deciding what should be the appearance of characters when they say, hey, show me the founding fathers of our country. That they're not interested in doing that. They would rather just go make money and do amazing work in AI. So, but reluctantly, they become responsible for the ethical and innovation roadmaps. So I think the output aspect of it, the goal is that decentralization will make this very diffused. The discussions will happen in a responsible way because many entities are looking at it from multiple directions. And the other output is that, as I said in the beginning, when I was in India, is there's an economy of digital labor, right? So when you have economy of digital labor, when our agents are actually participating in making money, maybe there's a Jeff agent and there's a Ramesh agent, and our agents could be making $1 a minute or $10 a minute, doing some amazing things on our behalf based on our knowledge, based on the work we put in into making the agent better. So there's going to be an economy of that, and for that economy to survive, clearly it cannot be run from one central entity. And over the history of humanity, we have seen the economic forces constantly push the innovation, the power structures, the graph of how the influence and money and data flows. It constantly becomes more of a graph than the spoke and hub. So the centralized model of a spoke and hub falls apart when every entity is working in this capitalistic world where they're saying, hey, I need to work this out.
It's almost communism versus capitalism. Not to be too reductive here, but but trying to say we will through some centralized planning way, we will, or maybe socialism, instead of saying we will decide exactly how everything should be done from our control tower. Saying, hey, it's almost like they're market forces, and they likely will be literally market forces as AI agents, the billions are working together and spending. In a bit, we'll get to this cryptocurrency coming to play here. Are they using tokens to interact with each other, to smart contracts? But like these market forces almost inevitably will shift the energy to the edges in a decentralized way, if I'm hearing you correctly.
That's right. And we are moving from let's call it the benevolent dictatorship right now to more of a democratic AI.
Interesting. Okay, so I love that high-level vision. Talk a bit about what that will look like, a little more pragmatically. I understand you have kind of the 4 pillars of decentralized AI. What's the best framework to understanding kind of your vision of what decentralized AI will look like in this context?
Absolutely. So as I said, as you move away from the mainframe PC era to the intranet era to the internet era to the web era of AI and AI agents, we think there are 4 main problems we need to solve. One is how do we work across data silos? So there's privacy preserving machine learning, privacy preserving inference, and a lot of people automatically assume that means federated learning. And I just want to say that's a terrible solution to solve many of these issues. It's one of the solutions, but actually it doesn't work because federated learning is a spoke and hub model, unfortunately. So we had to think about a graph version of it, not a spoke and hub version of it. So there are many aspects of privacy preserving, machine learning, data silos, and so on. So that's one pillar. The second pillar is incentivization, incentive engineering. And this is actually where the Web3 promise really shines, because the incentive layer is really well built through some scammy things like cryptocurrencies and DeFi and so on. But if you put the scammy aspect of it aside, the underlying computer science behind it is actually perfect for the incentive engineering, which is why should somebody participate in an ecosystem? Like if your agent is, my agent may be $1 a minute and Jeff is smarter, so his agent is $2 a minute. Why should be $2 and why should mine be $1 a minute? Right, so
mine's 10 cents in this analogy, but no. To your point, I'm guessing also though that you mentioned the first pillar, first bucket of data in data silos. I'm guessing that Web3 can also have a role here too, right? I met Vana's North Star is helping to create data marketplaces and user-owned data. So I'm guessing using blockchain and token systems, that also is helping to crack the problem of the first bucket too, I'm guessing, right?
Yeah, actually, Vana has taken a very interesting approach. And I would argue that it's actually tackling all the 4 pillars simultaneously. And I think projects moving forward should be thinking about this comprehensive approach the same way Vana is doing. So as you said, the first one is the data ownership and doing this in a privacy preserving way. If I see many projects out there, they just throw up their hands and say, you know what we're going to do is we're going to run this Web3 project and we're going to assume that data just flows to some center. And then we'll figure out how to use decentralized compute and decentralized data and so on. So I think, first one is critical, privacy. Second one is incentive engineering. What's the value of the data? What's the value of that compute? What's the value of that inference? That's the second one, incentive engineering. The third one is verifiability and proof of work. Like, how do I know that if I'm paying, I mean, right now when we go for OpenAI or Anthropic, and we are willing to pay whatever dollar for a million tokens, we assume that they're serving us the best model for that price. But how do I verify that in a decentralized system, right? Beyond reputation. So there's going to be the verifiability. Like, are you serving me the model that was trained on really good data, was really trained with billions of parameters, and are you really serving that right now?
It's the trust problem, right? Which,
Trust problem.
yes, which in some ways, What's great miracle is being able to prove digital identity and digital authenticity online in a world where normally you would have no idea if you are who you say you are online. And
Exactly.
blockchain has a unique ability to do this.
So yeah, so the absolutely. If we take the proof of work concept and broaden it, then you have proof of data, proof of training, proof of inference, and so on, right? So that's
Mm-hmm.
definitely the third pillar. And the fourth pillar, I would call it a special UX. And the UX will not just look like a dashboard that you would have seen on Coinbase or our favorite FTX, but it will be a very different kind of a UX because I like to call it a crowd UX. Because what's happening with decentralization is that it's not just about seeing what's going up, what's going down, and so on, but there are aspects of discoverability, there's an aspect of orchestration, and there are aspects of what everybody else is doing. A kind of an early version of that is like Google Maps, where on
Mm-hmm.
Google Maps is better than just a Maps app because
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't tell you how to go from point A to point B, but also tells you where everybody else is and what has been their journey, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you're going from point A to point B, saying these are the reds and these are the greens and you should avoid, and so on, right? So I think the crowd UX will look a little bit more like Google Maps than a traditional maps.
Is this UX crowd UX? Is this primarily used by humans or agents or both?
So that's a good thing, right? Because you want to minimize the cognitive load. So before we get to the that aspect, if my role as a human is to orchestrate all these agents to do things for me,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I'm willing to pay, I don't know, $10 for it, right? I need to figure out how do I discover, how do I choose the best ones? It's like taking a flight. The same
Mm-hmm.
flights might, many flights are going from Boston to San Francisco, but I'm going to pick something that's at the right time. That's kind of reputation. So I need some kind of a discovery, orchestration, selection, team formation, and then I need the UX for it. But as you said, there'll be agents helping me deal with other agents. So there's a concierge model that appears. And again, I think this is an open space. But what I like about what Vana is thinking about is looking at all these four dimensions simultaneously. When I talk to Anna and Arthur, they're thinking about all the four layers simultaneously. And this is the key. It's like a four-legged stool, right? I mean, you cannot have just three legs and expect the chair to be very stable. And I think every project needs to think through all these four issues, and that's what we work on at MIT as well.
Love it. To dive a little deeper on that fourth pillar, is part of the issue there kind of a more basic level. One challenge I see in this space right now, to your point about how there's, if you are trying to orchestrate all these different AI agents, or if you're AI agents, if you're chief of staff, or I jokingly think of it as the head butler. I used Downton Abbey back in the day, right? There's a show there's like a head butler, and the head butler is in charge of the footmen, in charge of the valet, and so on, right? So you have head butler agents who's marshaling the resources of all the other agents. Like in that world, is one challenge we have that there are so many projects out there right now, all building either AI agents or APIs for AI agents or the Rails for AI agents or infrastructure for AI agents. And there are many like good quality projects doing this. But it seems like at a very high level, when you step back, the overall ecosystem, the space is a bit of a mess right now. It's not sure what the exactly how these pieces will all snap together. It's hard to imagine how the Ramesh agents and the Jeff agent, how will they work together? We haven't really agreed upon a shared language or protocol yet, right? There are different projects to say, cool, I have the protocol, I have the protocol, but it's almost like we need the space hasn't yet settled on what will be the primary language and system we use to have all these agents play nice together. Is that kind of what you're getting at too? We need some kind of we need some standards to make it all happen.
I'm really glad you mentioned how all these projects sound like point solutions, and in a way they're all dependent on each other. Saying, hey, if you win, I will get some traction, and if you succeed, then your users will come to use my platform. So it seems like if I look at the space of decentralized AI, everything in this left corner and just playing with each other, dependent on each other, building castles in the air. And so what we're doing at the Decentralized AI program at MIT, just look for MIT Decentralized AI, is really looking at the whole space of decentralized AI. And some aspects of that is standards, some of this is protocol, some of that is verification, certification, there is benchmarks. But probably above all of that is the umbrella where we can do this in a very nuanced and very deliberate way so that it's not about the speed of a given project, but it's about how everybody wins together. And I should be very careful about using phrases like standards and protocol because I think unlike in the software and the web world or the SaaS world, where kind of either it took forever for the standards and protocols to emerge, or they were shoved down our throats by big tech players. I think what's going to happen in the agentic AI, decentralized AI space is that you don't really need the standards and protocol. It's just like when you and I talk, in the first 30 seconds, we decide what the protocol is going to be, what the standard is going to be, and then we go ahead and use that protocol moving forward. And I think we want to, this is a very important point I want to emphasize, which is we should not be bogged down by need to have common standards and protocols. And they will emerge in interactions and over time. Because the speed of innovation is so fast that if you ask everybody to slow down and make sure they agree to a specific protocol.
To try and restate that, make sure I understand it correctly, it's almost like eventually the AI agents, they will each be smart enough to figure it out. Like if one starts speaking in French, I was like, oh, okay, I was going to start in Spanish, but of course I know French also because I'm AI, I know everything. And they'll say, cool, now we're in French. And exactly. So to think that we need to decree you must all speak Latin is by the time we decide Latin will be the common language, it might be a dead language.
Exactly. That's a great way to explain it. And so that's one view of it, which is how are we going to fill up this space of decentralized AI? Not by taking people who are spending a lot of time in the bottom left corner. I mean, I go to a lot of decentralized conferences and they're working on the same thing again and again and again. They're all working on training large language models using decentralized data, decentralized compute. They're creating agent-to-agent communication protocols. I was like, guys, there's enough of work going on in that space. Yeah. There's all this other very meaty blue ocean out there. And if you come to our website, MIT Decentralized AI, you will see these multiple billion-dollar ideas you can work on and make the world a better place. Because we need you to go and innovate in that space. So I think that's why companies like Vana are stand apart because they're thinking of this four-pronged,
totally. And to that point, can you say a little more about how I think it's actually a great use case or almost case study to make it a little more kind of concrete for listeners and viewers of how like for the Vana is helping to crack all four of these problems. I think the first one is very clear, like data. That data is in Vana's bones and DNA of user-owned data. Talk a bit more about how it's going to refresh us on the pillars 2, 3, and 4, and how they're helping to find solutions.
Yeah, that's a great question. Let's think about it. Let's, Jeff, talk about the wrong way to build a solution like Vana, which is a lot of people are doing it out there, right? Mm-hmm. The wrong way to do it would be, hey, give us your data, give us your profiles, give us your interaction. We're going to centralize it in one place. Just trust us, we'll do the right thing. And what we're going to do is we're going to assign some kind of a value to it and figure out how to resell it. Okay? That would be the wrong way to build a company like
that. And that happens a lot. That happens a lot.
Yes. and I can't believe people are still doing it that way. Okay? Yeah. Even today, I'm talking about 2025. Clearly, big tech companies did that for the last 20 years. Yeah. And there was no other way to do it. So this was phase 1. So they did that. But in phase 2, The right way to do it, as very nicely articulated in Anna's paper, Anna's white paper, everybody should go read it, is first of all, the data doesn't get centralized, right?
Mm-hmm.
It either remains in some kind of an escrow, it remains in
Yep.
a trusted execution environments, and so on. That's number one. The second is that there's a way to figure out how much the data is worth, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's very critical. And the third one, which you hinted at earlier, is there's a verifiability aspect of it,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
There's proof of data, proof of training, proof of work, right? And when you get those three pieces together, we'll come back to the UX part of it later on because I think that's an evolving space. But if you
Mm-hmm.
look at these three concepts, privacy doesn't mean consent or confidentiality. Privacy really means no peak privacy, which means even
Mm-hmm.
a rogue player in a given company shouldn't be able to look at your data,
Right.
right? And I think that's the beauty of building a decentralized AI platform. And I think it's not easy to appreciate because
Yeah.
for the last 20 years we have been lulled into thinking that as long as they tell us that they will not resell our data, or as long as they tell us they have good practices, my data is safe. I think people have been lulled into that state. So it's very important to realize that this no peak privacy is a
No,
important element
that's
of it.
beautifully put. I'd love now to get to the kind of end game of your vision in the way moments ago when you outlined the evolution of AI and use the analogy of from mainframes to the web, and AI will go on a similar journey of their AI version to the web version. Talk a little more about what that will look like from even like a user point of view, or just for how will what will the world look like? What will online look like? Give us just a tease of what this might look like from an actual kind of experience point of view.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many dimensions difficult to imagine, but let's take some use cases, right?
Sure.
Let's say the Jeff agent and Ramesh agent are talking to each other. We're like, hey, dude, we're getting rusty. Our agents are getting rusty. So I would like to send them to an agent school. And they go to the agent school and they get a little bit smarter. They can talk about latest trends. They can learn about latest concepts and so on. They come back. And you and I might be willing to pay some money for agents to go to the agent school, right?
Interesting.
At some point, our agents
So
are
you got to pay for your kid to go to college. Now you also got to save up money for your AI to go to AI college, AI school, get a 512C or whatever that is going.
Yeah,
Sorry to cut
exactly,
you
right.
off.
Yeah, every time we think that technology is going to make our life easier, no, 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 that's never true. So the agents might say, hey, they're misbehaving. Maybe there's an HR department that says, hey, you know what? Let's think about your career path for your agent, and let's make
Hmm.
sure you understand the culture and values of this organization or this world and so on. At some point, the agents will become really, really bad, and we may have to send them to a repair shop. Like you run on this old version of Mac OS sitting in your house, but you need to upgrade to a Vana OS because that's where all the cool kids are hanging out. So we're going to send you to a repair shop and get the right upgrades and so on. Now, it sounds funny, but Jeff, think about the economy of it, right?
Mm.
What does it mean for a Jeff agent and Ramesh agent to talk to each other and get smarter together? Right now, everybody's thinking about AI as, even Web3, people are thinking as a purely transactional thing. I'm going to buy something from you or sell something to you and so on. But that's not what it's going to be. If you look at our own lives, broadly speaking, we have three aspects of our life. We have a social life, right, which is just for being a human being.
Hmm.
Then there is aspect of learning, and there's the aspect of labor, right? Broadly speaking, those are the three divisions of our
Hmm.
life.
Hmm.
And the AI agents are going to do the same thing. They'll go socialize on our behalf, they will learn on our behalf, and they'll make money on our behalf. So when you think about how decentralized AI is going to play out, think about what does it mean for an AI agent to get smarter at a AI school, AI agent school. What does it mean for me to find an amazing AI agent that's in Manila, Philippines, and says, hey, you should really hang out together because this person really likes to, I don't know, give you tips about golf. I don't know, right? Um,
Right.
so there's going to be this economy in this highly decentralized world of billions of agents. And I think that's where we are moving. And that's the difference between the internet and the web. aspect of it. And if you use the analogy from the 90s and 2000s, who would have thought there'll be something called eBay, right? Who would have thought there'll be something like Uber, so on. And we broadly speaking went through three phases. In the first phase, it was about companies that are possible because of the internet and web itself. And that were search companies, email companies, and so on. It didn't need anything else. The web and the internet was good enough for it to serve. In the second phase, we moved to companies like Uber and Airbnb and so on, where we said, oh, I can take human experiences that are highly monetizable and make them compatible with what's happening on the web, right? And only in the third phase, we moved to highly entrenched industries like health and agriculture and supply chain that didn't want to move despite new technology. And in the third phase, we started attacking using internet, web, SaaS to solve those problems. I think the same thing is happening in the Web3 world. First, we just did something that is possible on its own. We're like, oh, we're going to get cryptocurrencies, we're going to do NFTs and stuff like that because I don't need anything else. The Web3 is good enough. Now we are moving into a phase where saying, actually, let's take some real world problems, education. These are still digital experiences, and they're possible because of Web3 and get into that. And I think over time we'll move into other aspects of our GDP, like supply chain, like health, like agriculture, and so on. So I think the decentralized is going to make us move there much faster than if we stayed in a centralized world without blockchain, without incentive models, without privacy, and so on.
That is an amazing vision you sketch out. As we wind down here, last couple of questions, I'd love to hear what are the biggest challenges that have to be overcome to make that vision a reality?
Let's think about.
And then I would say that could be a 10-hour conversation right there. I know, but what are just kind of like just briefly? What are like in your mind? Is it mostly a tech problem that has to be solved? Is it a cultural challenge? What do you see as the biggest hurdle to make that reality into existence?
Yeah, I'm going to say something that's going to offend a lot of people.
Love it.
But I'm going to start with an analogy. If you think about Linux as an open source operating system, it was doing very well, but it really got traction when companies like IBM and Sun Microsystems and so on, you said, let's use this as a hedge against Microsoft OS. And unfortunately, even for decentralized AI, it's going to start gaining traction when established players start backing it, saying, actually, this is the way to move forward. And IBM, for whether we like them or not, was very clever to move from the mainframe world to the PC world to a highly decentralized world.
Interesting. Yeah.
And I think that's one thing that's required. And that's why I don't like to pit as a battle of centralized versus decentralized. Yep. But we should be trying to convince the centralized players, saying you got to move in this direction because it's good for the world, good for economy. So that's number one. The number two is that we need to get platforms that are highly deployed. It could be OS players like Microsoft or Apple. It could be very widely deployed platforms like, I don't know, WhatsApp or WeChat or Signal and so on. And we need to also get them to start believing in decentralization because they have the go-to-market channels that are much faster than doing this in a very organic fashion. So those are the two that need to happen, and people don't like me to talk about it because they would say, no, everything can be done bottom up. But then talking about what the decentralized AI community can do is, as I said, please be respectful of privacy and security of data. Think about the verifiability and the proof of work. Think about really open, transparent incentive engineering. That's not very scammy. And I think if those three things are done right, this could be a great movement.
Ramesh, that's a great note to end on. Thank you so much. I truly enjoyed the conversation. Thanks for unpacking all these concepts, and you gave us a really wonderful kind of hopeful framework to look at. Thanks again. Really enjoyed.
Thank you, Jeff.
Well, there you have it. Thanks again to Ramesh Raskar, Associate Professor at MIT Media Lab. And thank you again to my partner, Vana. Vana's vision is for user-owned AI through user-owned data. And their mission is to be the world's first open protocol for data sovereignty. They just unveiled the VRC20 data token standard, and you can find links to that in the show notes. And thank you finally to you, dear listener. We are still very new here at People's AI, so please grow with us. Help us grow, help us scale. Subscribe on the usual podcast platforms, including YouTube, post it on social, Twitter, X, LinkedIn, all that good stuff. Thanks again, and see you next time.